I did get an email
Mm-hmm.
from a guy who told me, you should really make this a book. And I was like, well, I spent 15 minutes Googling it, realized that you need to have a platform, you needed to have a book proposal. I was like, nobody has time for that. I don't have a platform. So I wrote him back and I was like, yeah, I don't have the ability to do that. I'm not going to be able to find an agent. And he wrote me back. He's like, no, you can self-publish on Amazon. I was like, really? And so that kind of got the gears shifting. And there's those moments of just kind of knowing, oh, that is what I'm supposed to do next. Oh, well, that is the next right thing to do. And that was one of those moments of like, all right.
What does it take to put your life's work out there in a really big way? How much can I do with this one precious life? Welcome to The Selfish Gift. The transformational personal experience of healing can profoundly alter the course of your life and even open up completely new pathways to your life's purpose. If you've ever felt called to build a business and life around a cause that has touched you deeply, you're going to love this conversation with my guest today. Annie Grace went through a profound personal shift when she released herself from alcohol addiction 8 years ago. She wrote and self-published a book about everything that she'd learned called This Naked Mind, which became an international bestseller. Today, Annie is one of the most influential voices in the new sobriety movement. Through her courses, her community, popular podcast, and other books, she has helped millions of people across the globe to find freedom from alcohol. Annie's compassionate, science-based approach offers a brand new way to look at the role of alcohol in our lives, creating a safe space for those who question their drinking but haven't self-diagnosed as alcoholics. Annie says that she doesn't teach people how to be sober. She helps them quash their desire to drink in the first place. Annie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Maggie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we're going to talk about so many things, and I really want to allow plenty of time to drill into the details about your book and your business, your books and your businesses, and all the wonderful things that you're doing today, and most especially like how it felt to create those things, what it took, etc. But before we get to all of that juicy stuff, please anchor us in a little bit of context. Can you tell us your story of, you know, what this mission is to you and how it came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was, I kind of like to say that I was an accidental author and now accidental entrepreneur because it was not really intentional. I actually was very successful corporately. So I was head of marketing in charge of 28 countries, flying all around the world, usually 2 to 3 international trips a month, and usually 2 to 3 countries per trip. So visiting multiple countries every single month, and was drinking two bottles of wine a night. And I had been thinking about my drinking for years, I think, as most people do. It started off really benign, really just, you know, at happy hour. I was asked to go to happy hour to see, really told that that's where the deals were done and that if I didn't show up, my career would be impacted. And so I was like, all right, sure, I'm here for that. And I ended up showing up. I had a little method. I would drink a glass of wine and then a pint of water to make sure I never got too tipsy. But alcohol is really sneaky. So I don't know where the line was. I don't know when it became drinking at home as well as drinking at work. I don't know when it became drinking for relief and for stress relief, as well as just drinking to be social. But by the time I was in charge of all of these countries and this huge role, I was drinking about 2 bottles of wine every single night. And I'd really just been wanting to get out of it. So I did what I thought the logical thing was, which was said, right, well, I'm going to have rules around this, and I'm going to cut back and, you know, not have any drinks till Thursday night. And that would go okay for a few weeks. And then it would be like, well, you know, something's happening on a Tuesday, or a different version of this would be like, okay, no more than 2 glasses a night. But then something would happen a few weeks later. So the reality was that I could keep my rules, but I always felt deprived and like I was missing out when I was keeping those rules. I felt really uncomfortable. I felt as if something was missing. So there was a huge emotional, not physical, but emotional impact to keeping the rules to drink less. And it's hard to exist in a space where you're trying to do something And you don't really want to be doing it. I would have just rather been drinking. So after years of this and really getting to a place where I didn't even trust myself anymore because I made all these rules, I'm like, well, why do I keep finding, outthinking myself or finding excuses for myself or finding ways around these little guidelines that I'm putting up? I actually decided to do something radically different. And in a very emotional morning, after having lots of drinks the night before, really coming off a very boozy week in the UK, I was flying home from London, and I just realized that what I was doing wasn't working. Like, continuing to try to do the same thing, it just wasn't going to work. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to look at this totally differently. And instead of asking the question I had been asking, which is, what's wrong with you? Are you an alcoholic? What's your problem? I decided to ask a totally different question, which was, well, why? Why is this different? What's changed? And I said, all right, well, I'm going to find out why. And for the next year, I started researching just all of the reasons that people drink. I made my own lists of why I drank, why I thought it helped relax me, help me have more fun, all of these reasons. And I just started looking into the science around it. We live in this great day and age where any person with 50 or $100 can download basically any scientific study that's ever been published. And I just started doing that. Like, it became a new favorite spending habit, was just to download these studies about, oh, well, that was another piece in the puzzle. And this is another piece in the puzzle. And it was so fascinating because every reason that I had given myself for drinking just wasn't actually factually true. Like, it did not do what it said on the tin. Like, it was not doing what it claimed and what we all believed it would do. And so it was about, I'd say, a year after that, that I walked out of my office and I told my husband, you know what, I don't think I'm going to drink anymore. And by the way, I was drinking the whole time. That was it. That was another part of my deal, was I was going to find out why, but I was also going to totally let myself off the hook, like stop making these ridiculous rules for myself that I wasn't even able to keep. It was very similar to my experience with trying to restrict food. You end up eating more, as a rebound effect. That's exactly what was happening to me with alcohol. I would try to restrict it, and then you'd have this rebound where you drink more because you felt so deprived by the restriction. And so I said, I don't want any more of that. I'm just going to drink whatever I want to drink, learn what there is to learn, and see what happens. And I didn't even have a predetermined outcome. It wasn't like, okay, I'm going to do this to get sober, or I'm going to do this to stop drinking, or I'm going to do this to moderate. It was just like, I'm just going to see what's here because I'm super curious, and whatever's been happening doesn't make sense to me anymore.
Wow. That's so brave and so powerful, and such a different, a different approach than the one that most people feel that they have to turn to, or the only thing they can think to turn to when they think about, slowing down or stopping drinking, which is Alcoholics Anonymous. Did you go to AA?
So actually, right before I was about to press publish on This Naked Mind, the book, since I had researched it very extensively and I had written about it extensively and really tried to unpack why we think how we think in our society and culture around alcohol, because that's one of the things that really tripped me up. We have a lot of false ideas. One of those being that, the person who's drinking too much is at fault. And just factually, that's not true, but it was really prevalent in that narrative. And so through that research, I realized that in order to publish this with integrity, I need to go to a meeting. And so I found a women's meeting in Denver. I went to the meeting. It was very eye-opening experience. It didn't contradict anything that I had discovered through my research. It was heartbreaking and beautiful and all the things. The heartbreak was that it was so sad and really heavy, really heavy. One of the heaviest spaces I've ever been in. And the beautiful part was that every single woman in that room gave me her personal cell phone number. And, they'd passed around a little pamphlet. Everybody wrote it down, and somebody was designated at the end to hand it to me, just in case I ever needed anything. And the willingness of people to go out of their way to say, day or night, doesn't matter when, I'll be here for you if you need to talk, was really beautiful. And that really impacted me, as did just the general heaviness of the entirety of the meeting.
Yeah, Annie, as you know, I also stopped drinking actually in thanks to your program, and I also went to a few AA meetings, and one of the things that I found was not supportive for me in that environment was the message of powerlessness, and that was so different from the message of empowerment that you share through your program. So it made literally all the difference in the world for this particular individual sitting here. And now you're free. Alcohol's in the rearview mirror. You've said that your goal was never necessarily to be sober, but to make alcohol small and irrelevant. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you have achieved that, and it has transformed your life. And now you are going about helping others to find that same or their own path to freedom. Talk to me for a moment about why this is so important for you that you have dedicated your life to it. It really has become your gift to the world. It started as your gift to yourself, and now it is the gift that you give to others. Why does it matter so much?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's funny because that word accidental, I think, was how I would have described it at first, but I do believe now that it is what I'm supposed to be doing. But I happened into it, I guess. And so through that journey and that research, I had produced just hundreds of thousands of words of journaling and my own experience and how I was trying on these ideas and my frustration that, wait, why are we told this is the truth when really this is the truth? Why do we believe this is the truth when really this is the truth? And just so much of my own wrestling with these concepts, and just to say it really bluntly, so much of the blatant lies that we are collectively bought into when it comes to alcohol. And so I had all of this, and I remember just knowing that other people needed to know this information. I mean, I was so amazed. Like, I just remember being in this constant state of like, wait, how are we? I was just baffled by how different the truth was according to science than the narrative that I had been living in and believing. And so I knew that if that was true for me, that was true for so many people.
And just to kind of put a finer point on that, what is the lie? What is the narrative that you have flipped on its head or understand the truth about now?
So, I mean, so many elements to that question, but one of the very specific ones is that we drink to relieve stress. And it's interesting because the response to alcohol in the body is a release of cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone. That is one of probably 6 different aspects of how alcohol actually creates stress, both in the near and long term in the human body. And the relief,
and anxiety too, right?
And anxiety,
yeah, which was always a huge part of my life. Like, and still is, I guess, to a degree. Although, wait a second, I need to question that because that doesn't actually feel true for me anymore. Wow.
That's awesome.
I've been a lifelong anxious person, almost, by definition. And drinking would have been one of the things that I would have turned to when I was in a situation where I felt like I was going to feel anxious, social anxiety, whatever we think about that. Alcohol is the social lubricant that kind of removes your anxiety. But in fact, no, it doesn't. It creates tremendous anxiety in the body and brain, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So much anxiety. And it is, I mean, it's there in black and white. Like it's not even, I mean, I guess it is probably hidden in popular culture, but when you just look at the people who are researching and studying these relationships between anxiety and alcohol, depression and alcohol, suicide and alcohol, I mean, they're just, it's so black and white, right? Like, that was one of the most staggering ones for me, is how alcohol is prevalent in the vast majority of suicides and abuse and all of these things. And it's just like so black and white, to the point where I was thinking, if we would have just discovered alcohol today, say we just created it in a lab today, 2022, and we said, oh, here it is, but we had the knowledge of what it actually did in the body and what it actually did to our societies and our cultures and our families and our parenting relationships. Like, would we ever allow it to be advertised on television? Probably not. We probably actually, the person who discovered it would probably try to go bury it and be like, yeah, that's enough, because there's nothing good there. And so these sorts of aha moments for me were just staggering. And I think they are staggering when people read, This Naked Mind as I take them through them, because you just sit there like every other thing. What? Wait, what? But once you see it, you can't really unsee it either. It's not as if you can't argue with these things. You actually can see them as soon as they're made clear in your own experience. All I have to do is ask you if you're, cumulatively more or less anxious, the more or less you drink. And we all know that, the more I drink, the more I suffer, right? But we get so confused because there is that 20 minutes of euphoria after a drink. And there is that very blatant fact that alcohol does numb the brain. So it will make us oblivious to our pain for a very short amount of time. And interestingly, we take that as relief when it's just the brain slowing down. And so we can escape for a very, to the point where if you drink enough, you will become unconscious or in a blackout. Yeah. You will literally not put down memories, or you will lose all consciousness. And so we know these things are true, but we don't look at these things. And so we're just in this collective, a bit of an alcohol delusion as a society, as harsh and intense as that is to say. And when I started waking up from the delusion, a lot of my early readers would say, it's like the Matrix. It's like you're taking, I forget if it's the red pill or the blue pill, but it's like you're taking the pill and you just can't see the world the same way. And so I knew that other people, I just felt so strongly that people needed this information as well, but I had no intention to become an author, an entrepreneur, or any of the things. So I just took these PDFs that I had been musing on and writing. And one thing that I think for me, it's so funny how the thing that you think is your weakness actually can become a strength. Because for me, I had a really tough time understanding some of these scientific studies. Like I would have to read it and read it again, and then I have to put it in my own words, and then I have to put it in my own words again, and then I have to try to think about it as if I was explaining it to my kid. And then finally I'd be like, oh, okay, that's how it works. And so I had a lot of that, just my own processing through these really complicated ideas into really simple statements. And when I put it out, I just put it out online because I had no intention of quitting my job. I had a great career. I was super successful. I had no intention of, making this my advocacy work. It was I was just not there at all in my life at that point in time.
So it started literally just as an act of service. Like I have to just share this. People need to know. It wasn't like some kind of master plan.
No, and I didn't even, it's funny in hindsight, now that I know things about how you actually create an email list or create engagement with, as an author, you need a platform, which is an email list, and you need an Instagram list. I didn't have any of those things. I actually didn't even, I figured out how to post it onto a web page as a PDF that you could just download directly from the web page. You didn't have to give me your email address to download it.
Oh, yeah, that would be like a mistake in marketing terms.
Right. Because I didn't, someone even, I had my email at the end of it just to look like if you had any thoughts or if you knew anything else. Really, I wanted people to tell me what else they knew that I wasn't seeing yet. And so somebody emailed me and they're like, you should get email addresses. And I was like, wow, why would I do, for what purpose? I had no concept. And he's like, yeah, what if you write another book? Or what if you want to tell somebody something? And I was like, huh. And I totally ignored that one. But then I did get an email from a guy who told me, you should really make this a book. And I was like, well, I spent 15 minutes Googling it, realized that you need to have a platform. You needed to have a book proposal. I was like, nobody has time for that. I don't have a platform. So I wrote him back and I was like, yeah, I don't have the ability to do that. I'm not going to be able to find an agent. And he wrote me back. He's like, no, you can self-publish on Amazon. I was like, really? And so that kind of got the gears shifting. And there's those moments of just kind of knowing, oh, that is what I'm supposed to do next. Oh, that is the next right thing to do. And that was one of those moments of like, all right. And I had a friend at my son's school who she has both traditionally and self-published multiple books. And so the next time we were in the school parking lot, I was like, hey, Kirsten, so can you tell me a little bit about how this works? And she's like, yeah, I'll help you however you want to be helped. She actually helped me think of the title. She read my first drafts. She put me in touch with her editor, who is, still my editor to this day. And it was just really cool how it all worked out. And then, This Naked Mind was self-published in 2015. And then from there, I think because that PDF within the first 2 weeks, almost 20,000 people downloaded it. I could see on the back end how many people had downloaded the PDF. And I started getting letters from all over the world of people just saying like, wow, yeah, me too. Like I didn't fit in the traditional models and they didn't speak to me, and this does. And it was really cool, but it is, I believe, like, if you're going to use the cheesy words, a calling. It probably is that, but it also felt very happenstance.
I love that. Well, I mean, that's basically that's that's almost like the purest version of a calling, right? Because it's not like the calling arrives as an impulse or an idea or a message like of what it will become. It's more just like, no, it arrives as an action, as an action that you just feel compelled to do without any thought about, the bigger picture or where you think it will be going. But this thing that you've just shared about like, oh, I put my PDF out there and then, 20,000 people downloaded it. That's going to have people listening saying, wait, what? Because wait, where did you put it up? Like, I know your story a little bit, and I know that you were actually part of the Hello Sunday Morning community, right? Is that how that worked and how that helped your PDF to catch fire?
Yeah, so a few different things. So first of all, I was part of Hello Sunday Morning. They don't have it anymore.
Don't they? Oh, too bad. It was awesome. It was also something that I leaned on a lot and loved.
Yeah. They have something now called the Daybreaker app, which is really different, but they used to have a blogging collective where instead of just blogging into the ether, everybody who is interested in this conversation about alcohol could start a blog within a community. So everybody had their own blog. And then within this community, I could follow your blog and you could follow my blog. And so as I was doing this research, I was also just like writing posts, I guess, about like, hey, who knows about this, and just getting other people's stories. And so that was all part of it. And so it was actually the program that I found, which was the cheapest one. We didn't have Squarespace at the time, or I guess some of the easier, sexier ones, but it was called Rainmaker. And you could just put up a page. And then when I had that page, I shared that in the community. And then somebody in the community shared it on Reddit.
Okay.
And that's where it got a ton of traction. And then it was a very small, I think, was this like 9 years ago? It was a very small, it felt very small, international kind of people like, trying to question stuff, but outside of the traditional models. Yeah. And once somebody did, there wasn't any real books in that genre yet. Like there was maybe two. I remember like Mrs. D, there was a book by her, and there was Ann Dowsett Johnson's The Drink. And so there's like two books. And so if somebody shared something, it was just went everywhere. So somebody would post it in the Facebook group, and then somebody would post it because there was tons of these little groups popping up. But yeah, it just became like really viral within that immediate community.
So I guess really when you think about it that way, you did have a platform. You just didn't own your platform, and it wasn't even a platform that you were thinking of in that way. But but it's a really important thing to understand. The reason that came, to catch fire in the way that it did is because you did have an ability to share it with people who were interested. And those are two elements to a platform that are, both important. It's the people that are listening and their level of interest in what you have to say. So it can't just be people listening. It has to be people listening who are also interested and engaged. And I know that, when it comes to sobriety or anything to do with a particular health or wellness or lifestyle concern, those communities tend to be very tight knit because the people within them, care so deeply and personally about the situation that they share, the condition that they share.
I was just going to say that's really interesting. That's really true. It was almost as if I was part of a platform as a
Mm-hmm.
guest. And then I became an influencer, to put it in our today words,
Right. It
through
wasn't
that,
a platform
right?
under your name, but it wasn't
Right,
like, you know,
right.
you, the brand, but it was, if you think about a platform as like almost literally, like think of it in literal terms, like a, you know, like a apple crate that you stand on that, you know, sort of like
Yeah.
the milk crate at Speaker's Corner that people get up, or a stage, you know, platform is anything that kind of elevates you and allows you to speak to an audience. And in this case, it was that shared platform that gave you access to people who would read your work. Now, before I do want to talk a lot about like the nuts and bolts of what happened next, but give us a bit of a fast forward for a second and explain where you are now in your business and your life as an author.
Oh, awesome. So now, very organically, in a really cool way, basically everything that I have created so far has been just like the very first email. Somebody has said, "Hey, you should do this. Hey, we would like it if you did this. Hey, well, have you thought about doing this?" And so for a long time, I said yes to everything. I can't say yes to everything anymore. But I try to say yes to the big things. And so, yeah, somebody was actually a psychologist out of the UK said that he would really like to use my work in his practice with his patients. And do I have a certification for, certifying people with like the method? And I was like, no, but will you help me create one? He's like, yeah. So his name is Andrew. Andrew and I went out to start really 2016, created this Naked Mind Institute over the next 2.5
Amazing.
years. And so now we have 175 certified coaches globally, worldwide. And it's really life coaching, but with an emphasis on habit change. And so habits, including alcohol, nicotine is coming out later this year. So we're going to be expanding into just writing this Naked Mind for nicotine. So that's coming out. And I've also created really realizing that sometimes the entry point into the conversation of looking for a book to, stop drinking or control your drinking is too high of a step. So in 2017, really challenges were catching on. They were just all the rage. And I said, wouldn't it be great to lower the barrier to entry to this conversation even more and almost repurpose this Naked Mind into a 30-day challenge? And so did that and created the alcohol experiment, which has been a free online video-based challenge that now 360,000 people have gone through, which is just awesome. And then a book came out alongside of that after the challenge was live. The challenge was almost a year ahead of the book, but then published a book called The Alcohol Experiment, and combined those two books. We were just talking before we started recording that I'm about 20,000 copies away from 1 million books shipped.
Wow. Wow. That's so impressive. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I was part of that 30-day challenge that you shared back in, I think it was 2017. So,
So
and
good.
it took me years after that to finally kind of get free, but thank God that you were there. And okay, so what else? You've got your coaching certification, you've got the courses, the challenge, the nicotine book, the alcohol experiment book. And you've got a new community membership program that you're now doing, right?
Yeah, so we just launched this Naked Mind Companion app. So it's a free app. It's available on the App Store. And really the idea behind it was just a place that people can talk, get support, that, I felt really unmoored in a way. I thought that when I stopped drinking, I was going to be kind of welcomed with open arms by this sobriety/recovery community, because why not? We're all doing the same thing. That wasn't really the case because of how counterintuitive my entire approach had been. I had stopped trying to stop drinking to actually stop drinking. So that was super counterintuitive. I didn't really identify with being so, like, the labels were irrelevant to me, and not, and actually I was almost to a point in all of the intentional platforming that I started to do where I never wanted my language to be a barrier. So I actually would say, like, we don't use the word sober. We don't use the word addiction. We don't use the word alcoholic. We're talking to people who just might be happier drinking a bit less. And really, I wanted my language, my litmus test for how I wanted to be was that if I was at a bar and somebody was sitting at the bar, there were 4 drinks in, I could sit next to them at the bar stool and have this conversation without them running away. And so I think that was hard for people to swallow, that I was having this way wider, more inclusive conversation. It felt like, no, this is our space a little bit. It's changing for sure, but I just suffice it to say I was not welcomed.
Right. Some people must have, I imagine, characterized you as, oh, you're an alcoholic in denial about that. And did you hear things like that?
Yeah, or even that I was going to do damage because I was offering a way that didn't involve meetings. And so there was a lot of, that sort of thing. And yeah, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of, who do you think you are? There was a lot of, okay, you must just be deluding yourself sort of thing. So it wasn't kind of this, like, we're all on the same team here. And then of course it's quite difficult to talk to the people you've been drinking with about any of this stuff.
Yeah.
So right from day one, I felt like there needed to be somewhere we could connect. So I found this free, kind of like Hello Sunday Morning, free blogging platform. And I just put a link to it, nakedmindcommunity.com, in the back of the book. And, that's grown to almost 200,000 people. But this Naked Mind Companion app is just a free app that includes that community, but it also includes, like, I have done a video for the last 7 years on every question I've been asked that wasn't already covered in the book. So it includes 700 just free videos on literally every single question I've been asked. I've just recorded a video and posted it on Facebook or YouTube. And this just makes them all super searchable. So it's a really robust library for anybody who's just exploring this conversation. And
then you have the Path.
Yeah. So the Path is it is a coaching program for people who feel like they need more support. Mm-hmm. I think that's really interesting, where for a lot of people it is, I think there's 3 main reasons we overdrink, right? One is our beliefs about the substance itself. Those are beliefs like it relaxes me, or it's fun, or it tastes good. And when we see science that totally disproves that, it's pretty easy for our brain to say, okay, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. That makes no sense. There's a deeper level, though, and those are our beliefs about society. Am I going to fit in with my partner? Am I going to be able to be in this mommy wine group anymore? Am I going to fit in at happy hour? Am I going to be good enough at my job? And I think those are much harder to overcome, because they have to do with the nature of humans to want to fit in. Yeah. And then I think the deepest level of beliefs are the ones that we hold about ourselves, that we are drinking to numb from. And those beliefs, of course, are, I'm not strong enough, or I'm not beautiful enough, or I'm not attractive enough, not funny enough. And those beliefs that we just are really uncomfortable in our own minds, or with who we are. And, often they stem from trauma and perceptions we have of ourselves that we've picked up along the way. But when you're drinking, this all was born from, I get close to 10,000 emails a month, and I'd say 95% of them are thank you letters, but there's the 5% that are like, hey, this didn't work for me. And I was like, why is it? Why does it not? What else is there? And really realize that, like, if we are drinking to numb from our own mind, our own experience of being us, and we don't heal that, like, we don't have a chance. And so the Path is really focused on, we do the substance, we do the society, but then we spend a lot of time on that deeper level of self. We actually call it living naked, which is just being able to live completely authentically ourselves, and moving towards that journey of building a life you don't need to escape from. And it's all coach led. So the coaches coach, in that program.
Okay. Well, my mind is sort of blown right now, and my head is spinning a little bit, because I'm thinking about all these pieces. Okay. It's enough that you wrote a book and it became a bestseller that sold 1 million copies. You've got your groups, your courses, your training program accreditation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, in 8 years. This is just crazy, off the charts, rapid growth, change, and business traction. So at some point, This was no longer just happenstance. This is no longer something that just dropped in your lap. At some point, you were consciously and deliberately causing those new things to occur and putting effort toward them. So talk to me about the moment that you decided to do that. Like, what? Presumably you quit your job, et cetera, but just but I'm more interested in the internal shift where you went like, okay, I'm going to take this seriously and really going to build something intentionally. What was that like, and how did you move through that moment of transformation?
Yeah, for sure. So it was pretty quick because, well, I guess it wasn't all that quick. So I stayed working for a year after.
Annie, it's only been 8 years. It was pretty quick. Okay.
Yeah, it depends. If you're a hugely impatient person like me, but I stayed working for a year after I quit drinking, and about a year in, I was working for a company that was headquartered in the UK. And I had a visa to the UK. We were going over for, months at a time as a family, living over there. I was traveling over there all the time. And ultimately, it was always kind of on the horizon that I would have to move at some point. And 2-3 years, put it off. But finally, there was a bit of a change in management. And they said, no, we want our head of marketing physically here in the office all the time. And so I was like, okay, well, what's the alternative? And I ended up getting offered a severance package. I could move, or I could take this severance package. And it really felt like, gosh, are we kidding? Like, of course, like I have this book now. I have this opportunity. I could do this. I could actually start a website and actually start writing a blog. I remember one of my first blog posts was called 6 Reasons I Don't Drink Anymore. And they were just really simple reasons. It had to have been, less than 500 word post. And it just got picked up so many times and shared so many times. And it was just one of those little signs of land of like, yeah, okay, you're doing the next right thing. You're doing the next right thing. And but I had a lot of fear. So when I quit my job and took the severance, I started 2 businesses at once. I started the Snake in Mind LLC, and actually said, all right, I'm going to do this. But I also started an advertising agency because that's what I knew. and I got some great clients, and I was doing a lot of agency work, and I just didn't like it. And I was like, it just didn't feel, when I would do these things that This Naked Mind called me to do, like the writing, like I started getting invited on podcasts, like the podcast. I felt alive. I felt like this is the best and highest of me. And when I was doing I was writing white papers for, government, installations of military, equipment. And it was in translating complex languages in briefing the artist. It just, nothing in it felt like the best version of me. And so, I shut out in that business, although it was much more profitable. It was actually profitable.
At that time. Well, first of all, now I'm just even more impressed, and you have to stop being so impressive because I can't handle it.
Yeah, we were making at that time $10,000 a month in that business.
Incredible.
And that felt really like a lot of money. I was like, okay, can replace my corporate salary. This is great. And but it was just sucking the life out of me.
Yeah.
And so I had the difficult conversations with the clients and unwound the deals and had to do what I had to do. And then it was just kind of this every day, if I wrote a blog post, we would sell a few more books. If I didn't, we wouldn't. I remember a very definitive day. It was, I forget what year, it must've been probably the first year it was published, but we were skiing because our kids were out of school. So it was December 31st. And of course, that would be the day that this book would sell a lot of copies.
Right.
I remember being on the lift on my little Amazon app looking, and I'm like, wow, we've sold 40 copies. That's crazy. We never sell more than 5 copies. What's going on here? And then by lunch, it had crossed 100 copies. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. We sold 100 copies of this book in one day. And I'm just, who are these people? How are they finding this? But it was highly stressful too, because if I wrote a blog post, or if I got myself booked on a podcast, or if I, and I was doing all of this basically cold outreach to authors that already existed, or bloggers, and some authors. There are very few authors, but bloggers that already existed in this space, just like, can I send you a copy of my book? I was getting a lot of no's. Full circle, I ended up hiring one of the women who told me no. 5 years later, we laughed about it a lot. But it was just like really, just trying hard to get a lot of, to get books to sell and people to get the book, and having a lot of just faith in the fact that, because I did have so much early feedback before the book was published, I did have a knowing that if it just gets in enough people's hands, it will take care of itself. Like I had that just feeling of the word of mouth, because it is just really a life-changing book, and it changed my life. The 2 weeks when I first decided to actually when I decided to self-publish, and I had 2 weeks between when I got my first copies, I got like a dozen copies, and then I was going to press publish. I gave them to all my friends and I asked them to read them. I mean, those 2 weeks were probably the most intense of the whole thing, because I was like, if this is really good, they're going to say that it's really good, or they're going to want to stop drinking even more so. And if they're not, then they're like, it's not really hitting the mark. And most of them did stop drinking, which was crazy. Wow. But I was so stressed about it. Even my editor stopped drinking. It was really funny. My architect right now, we're like building a house. He stopped drinking. It's like
everybody who meets you stops drinking. Yeah, but that's incredible. Okay, so was there a moment where you had a chat with yourself, and did you feel nervous about like throwing your identity in this direction? Like, okay, I guess I'm, so I hear you closed down your agency because it wasn't enlivening for you. It was crushing your soul, and that makes total sense. But along with that must have been a decision like, oh, I guess I'm going to be like alcohol girl for the duration or for the foreseeable. Like, did you have a weird moment where you were like, did you consciously choose that, or how did that, tell me about how that felt.
So I had a really weird moment, because what happened was that I didn't see it that way. I like literally in my the pendulum had swung so far from me being in this kind of societal delusion that the problem is with the people to the problem was with the alcohol. And like we should all just know, but it's not a people problem. Like I had swung so far from being like, oh my gosh, people are going to judge me, into like, what the heck is wrong with that? Like all of us.
Right.
Like it's gone so far that I wasn't even conscious of this, but I posted after I shut down my agency, I changed my LinkedIn profile, and I posted a few of my blog posts on LinkedIn for the first time. I did not do this consciously. There was no conscious thought about that shift until I got a DM on LinkedIn, and it was a friend of mine. He's like, I'm telling you this just because you're my friend, but just so you know, you just committed career suicide. And I was like, oh, did I really? Like, what? And I was trying to unpack it. And it was funny because prior to that time, I was pretty well known in like the financial services marketing arena. And I would get, at least 2, sometimes more serious headhunters every month, like without a doubt, for people who wanted to put me into global positions. And they dried up overnight. I never got another one. Never. And it was like, people see this different than I see it. I thought like I was the victorious one. Everybody.
So you know what's funny about that? Because when I asked you that question just now, I actually wasn't referring to stigma. I was actually referring to just like a big shift in sort of like, what is my work in the world? I guess it's going to be about alcohol. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The stigma thing is so much more real when you're locked in it than after you get out of it. Like I recognize that in myself too. When I was just thinking about quitting or had just quit, there was all this like, will I ever share this publicly? La, la, la. And now I don't care, because I am free from that idea of self-judgment or judgment of people who have this experience. But I get what you mean. Yeah. I imagine, career suicide. I didn't even mean it that way.
And to answer the question you meant to ask, which I didn't understand at the time, I always thought this is so much bigger than alcohol. Like for me, it was about changing how we think and what we question. And so for me, it was like, it was always a bigger conversation. Like I never felt like I was going to be like hemmed into being the alcohol person. I for sure am right now. But also like when we get into some of the deeper content that, and the book that you and I are working on, I feel like it's always been so much bigger for me. And so I didn't internally feel that. And I grew up in such an atypical situation where I was so outside of what was normal, which at the time felt terrible, of course, but now is such a gift. And I didn't, so I just have I've always been outside of what's normal. So I've never given like a ton of thought to that. And also I'm like, okay, if that's how people want to see me or categorize me. And it is kind of a ninja trick too, because people really do have this sort of level of, oh, well, you had that problem. And, my friend Arlen Hamilton, she's always like, the best thing in the world is to be underestimated. And I'm like, that does it for me out of the gate. Like,
I love that. Well, and that, what that explains, because this is another question I've been kind of like planning to ask and thinking about as you've been talking, but that sort of explains where you found the fortitude to stand tall and keep going in the face of those headwinds from like the Alcoholics Anonymous and sort of recovery establishment, if you like. Because it's one thing to go out there as a human being who's, sort of talking about problem that they've overcome. It's another thing to then go out and say, and by the way, I'm a, self-taught expert in it now, but to say not only I'm a self-taught expert in this now, but my expertise positions me in direct opposition to the prevailing attitudes and understandings. Like, what? And you did all of this just like, yep, this is the next right thing. I'm going to just keep going.
I have to give a lot of that credit, though, not to me, but to the people who are reading my work, because I'd say I was almost the last to know. Like,
that's so cool.
Scott Pinyard on my team, he's been working. He was on my podcast. That's how I met him, and we just hit it off. And I was like, someday I'm gonna actually have a company and we're gonna work together. And he's like, that would be great. And it took us a few years to get there, but now he has been working for This Naked Mind for a long time. And I call him like my first true believer, because he would just come in and he would tell me about the impact it had in his life, or the people who were those early readers were telling me. And so for me, it wasn't about doing it for me to like stand in opposition, because I wouldn't, it doesn't matter my upbringing. I would have crumbled. Like there was so much opposition, and it was so intense and so fear-based. I mean, like letters and even an intervention from about 7 different experts that wanted to, get my time to convince me not to publish the book before it was published, because I was going to be harming people on a mass scale and killing people. And so this, I ended up at the last minute, and I was like, okay, I just want to know. I just need to know what they're going to say. I need to know if I'm going to do anything wrong. I really need to know. And then I actually got some better advice, which was like, have you done your homework? Have you done your research? Do you trust yourself? If all those things are true, you do not need to subject yourself to this panel. Oh, wow.
And have you helped real people? Like you've seen the results. It wasn't just theoretical at that point, right? You could turn around and say like, look, the proof is in the pudding right here.
Yeah. And so I didn't get on that call at the last minute, which I'm really thankful in hindsight. I mean, I think but who knows? Maybe I wouldn't have been able to handle it. Maybe This Naked Mind would have been stopped in its tracks on that call. It's a very real possibility, because I, like we all do, gave so much weight to people in authority and people with credentialing and people who, always think everybody knows more than I do. And so I would have to say that if it wasn't for the people who are writing me every day since I put that PDF, there's not been a day that's gone by. And it used to be 20 or 30 emails a day with these like thank you letters. And I would take them so seriously. I didn't even take them in the right, I would say, energy at first. I would take them as, like heavy, like, oh no, like now I'm responsible for you too. Like I didn't have the most positive response to it, but, and now it's hundreds and hundreds every single day. And like,
Wow.
if it wasn't for this like huge, like pushing me to keep going with their, stories and then right from the beginning, well, not the beginning, but I started this Naked Mind podcast. But even before that, these letters, they were so beautiful and they were so poignant that I started writing back and I said, hey, can I put this on my blog? And so this Naked Mind, or this Naked Life is what we call them, Naked Life stories. And so we started publishing those stories on the blog. And, you know, just, I mean, there might be 1,000 now. There might be more than 1,000. There's so many.
That's
and then,
amazing.
you know, the podcast is like over 500 episodes. It's just people telling me their story. But if it wasn't for that counterbalance, like I don't think I'm Superwoman. I would have crumbled to dust and it would never happened.
Okay, I want to talk to you for a second about the logistics and strategy around going from manuscript to published book, and then where that has gone from there. I know that we talked a while ago, and you explained to me that you had the PDF, and then you were I don't know quite where the editor came in, but at one point you had an editor who kind of pulled the rug out from under you, or took you to task a little bit on what you, so it wasn't just like, well, this thing came out of my brain and now it's sold 1 million copies. There was a step along the way, and it was tough, right? Tell me about the edit process, when it happened, how it felt.
So yeah, it was so brutal. So basically I had gotten all this feedback. So I'm thinking, okay, great. Somebody says this should be a book. So I'm thinking, okay, great. The hard work is done. I've written this book. So I send that first draft to the woman at my school, Kirsten. She introduced me to her editor, Catherine Gray. And I send it to Catherine, and she explains to me the whole deal. She's like, we're going to do a developmental edit, and then I forget what it's next, a line edit, and then a copy edit, and then a proofread. And I was like, whoa, there's like a lot of steps to this whole editing process. I thought it was just the proofread. That's what I thought editing was.
Right.
It was just a proofread, right? And I was like, okay, what is a developmental edit? And she's like, it's where I'm going to read it and I'm going to tell you where I think there's holes, and I'm going to tell you what I think is wrong. And I was like, oh, I don't know that it needs that. I mean, like it's gotten a lot of feedback.
Excuse me while I laugh, because I hear that from time to time, and people are wrong when they think that.
I felt really sure.
Okay.
I was like, oh no, like whatever. And so she's like, no, trust me, like you really want to do this. And so and I did not know it. I was not pre-framed. I did not know what to expect. I did not have Maggie holding my hand. I got a 2-page letter back from her, email, with her developmental edit, which was crucifying. I mean, I laid in bed for multiple days, hysterical, because...
Wait, it was only 2 pages? That sounds short. You mean it was a 2-page editorial note, and then had she also dropped comments in the manuscript all the way
comments.
Through?
She was like, that's not even where we're at. Like, I just, we're not even at the place where I will drop comments in this manuscript.
Okay. Ouch.
We ended up doing 2 developmental edits because the first one was so like, this is a total rewrite.
Oh my God. Wow. Yeah, that's brutal, girl, but good on you for doing it. Holy smokes. Okay, keep going. Yeah.
So then I rewrote it all, and then we did another development, and then she did it was, you know, I at least knew what to expect the second time, but she didn't have, you know, it wasn't long, because her basic things were like, I don't believe you. Like you've made a lot of claims. And to be fair, I had read a lot of stuff. I wasn't doing this for anybody else. So I didn't go back and like, I wasn't putting in like APA, like footnotes,
citations, and
I was just taking this stuff, putting it through like the Annie filter 10 times, then regurgitating it in usually an analogy, because that's what works for me. Like, it's kind of like this, you know? And then so I'm making all of these huge proclamations and analogies based on science, and I'm using the word science flippantly, but I have not a single footnote, not a single citation. There was no actual. So, and by the way, then it was so hard for me, because then I had to go back and like, I would write this vignette about how this alcohol was kind of like this, right? there might've been a dozen footnotes to that little vignette because I'd like processed it in my own mind. And then I had to go back and like, oh gosh, it was so hard. That process took longer than writing the book.
It does. That's so true. It's so true. The revision is often deeper and harder and more time consuming than the initial first draft. But
Yeah.
I'm just so impressed that you stuck with it after. Okay. And okay. So then what? So you went through the developmental edit, then a second pass. And then you published the book. You self-published it to begin with. And then tell me about like when all the big trade publishers came knocking.
So yeah, we did 2 developmental edits, 2 line edits, and a proofread. That was, like, the craziest. Then we published it, and I was like, that was worse than having a baby. Like that was so brutal. And then it was 2 years it had been out, and I think they all have like some sort of mechanism when they can tell if a self-published book has sold 65,000 copies, because right when we crossed the 65,000, I got a letter from HarperCollins, and then I got like courted by them on the phone. They sent me a bunch of books. They wanted to fly me out. And then I got a letter from another publisher, and I was just going to say yes to Harper. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I thought, oh, traditional publishing is the cat's meow. So I have to do that. And then I got put in touch with a friend of a friend of a friend who introduced me to my agent now. And then it ended up going to auction with the top 5 publishers, and came
That's
out
amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask, but you probably won't tell us. But can you give us an idea of how much you made through self-publishing, and then how much your advance was, or like? And I'm not trying to pry. Just give us a ballpark or an idea of like just what this means.
I feel like I've talked about this before, so I don't really feel like it's a big secret. So when I was self-publishing, I would make on average $4.50 to $5 a book. Mm-hmm. And then of course, traditional publishing advances are advance on future royalties. So they're not actually money outside of the advance you would get. Mm-hmm. And it would be 7.5% of the list price. So it was usually less than $1 a book. And so I did that math before I signed on the dotted line. But also because I didn't know what I didn't know, I was like, oh yeah, we'll for sure be able to sell 5 times as many books. The truth was that was nowhere near the case. So it ended up being a pretty, like, I won't say it's a mistake, because my first appearance on Good Morning America, for instance, was through the traditional publisher. I don't know that would have happened. And that opened up a floodgate. Like, there's pretty much no media that I haven't been on, maybe like the Today Show, because they drink wine while they're talking and giving the Today Show. But other than that, like it's been almost all of the things, and that is stemmed there. So, I would never say it was a mistake. I would just say, and I had a principle that I'd rather reach new people than make more money. And so that was kind of my guiding principle. So I have no regrets about
and being in bookstores would enable you to do that, because being that way
they did sell more, fractionally more, maybe 10% more copies. So that was, but still it's like 10% more people. Like, so that was great. Being in bookstores, the PR, all those sorts of things. So it was worthwhile to me, but I earned out my advance pretty quickly. I guess 95% of authors never earn out their advance.
That's right.
So that money they're getting up front, that's the end all be all money. I earned out the advance really quickly. And it was like, it was substantial. It was like, let's say it was, I don't know how much I'm like supposed to say or not say, but it was,
I don't know. I'm not your accountant or your lawyer,
multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, closer to $1 million than not. And
wait, like the number of the dollars, or what do you?
The dollars.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, but I earned that out pretty quickly. And so, so I think it's interesting. It's just like I was reading recently about how musicians are compensated too. And I know that's changing. It's the same sort of situation. Like the author is kind of paid last and least in the traditional model. That's how it feels, or how it actually is. Mm-hmm. And so when we didn't have the opportunity to market ourselves like I did, like the blood, sweat, and tears of writing the blog posts and, posting in different groups and all the stuff I was doing when I was self-published, it made a lot of sense to pay somebody all the money to do all that stuff for you. it makes much less sense, I think, these days than it used to make.
Such an interesting story, because your experience is quite atypical. It's quite atypical. Most people will not have that quite that kind of pathway to success as an author, and then go on to build a highly successful business on the back of that. But it is what we dream of, and it's what we have in mind when we, kind of dare to imagine how good could it get, what does the ultimate kind of like road to success look like? So, you're a famous person now, basically, you just, you are. And I know that sometimes people know you when you're out and about. How has it been for you having, now that you've crossed over and you're a public figure for sure, a visible public figure? What is that like? Is it worth it? What's the downside? Talk to me about that for a minute.
I think I'll say a few things about this. First of all, my kids like a lot more than I do. They like when we're in an airport and someone would come up and like ask for a selfie and tell me I've saved their life. They just
feel proud.
They just really think it's the coolest thing in the world. I then feel like I'm in a fishbowl for the whole rest of the day. Like, oh my gosh, who else is noticing me? And I feel really awkward and uncomfortable. And I also feel like I've had to really work on the fact that like, you're not meeting somebody on even ground, like usually if you meet someone, hi, I'm going to tell you something about me. You're going to tell me something about you. We're going to have an even exchange of knowledge about each other. They're meeting me. They know everything about me because it's a very intimate book. I know nothing about them. And so the reaction is, or the interaction is not, I had to reframe it from, oh, this isn't a get to know you interaction or a exchange interaction. This is a training myself to accept gratitude interaction, which is a really tough thing for a human to do. I think it's hard for all of us to just accept a real show of gratitude, but actually my job in that interaction is to accept the gratitude as gracefully as I can, because that's actually what is the best thing for the person. At first I would make it so awkward because I was like, I love your book. You saved my life. It's so amazing. I'd be like, I love your sweater. Where'd you get it? Like, I was just like trying
so
to like,
sweet. You're trying to like reciprocate. Yeah. Like, me too. I'm a big fan. What's your name?
Yeah, it was like I just really wanted to acknowledge, that, oh gosh, but it just made it awkward for both of us. So then when I finally, like, of course, I am a human brain, how it works more than almost anything else. That's where I spend my fun thinking time. And so when I really realized, oh, the interplay in this reaction is really different than anything I've experienced thus far, I feel like I can be much more graceful in it now. Which is great. I think though that one of the real benefits is that what I've had to learn about other people's opinions as opposed to my opinion of myself has really had to shift and change. And it's really freeing when you can finally get to a point where, because for every lover, there's, a lot of haters. And so little things from, oh, what she's saying is dumb, to, really intense things like I was talking about earlier. But the brain focuses on those things more. Now, I've never had somebody do that to me in real life, like in person, but of course online. And to be like, oh, wait, like I'm still me. Like, and it was actually my 13-year-old son, because one of these times happened and I was like, well, I just feel so weird because then like, what are they going to think? Like, what if they think this or what if they think that? And he goes, Mom, it's their right to think whatever they want to think about you, but you get to think whatever you want to think about you. And
the mouths of babes. Wow. Yeah.
Because I was so concerned. I was like, I don't want to be famous. I have my own opinions about what famous people, like growing up in Aspen, like that whole dynamic. And I was like, I have my own like snags there. I don't want that. And he goes, but they can think that you're famous and that's for them. And that helps for them. They want to think that. And you don't have to think that about yourself. I was like, oh my gosh. Like, yes, that is so true.
Will your 13-year-old boy be my life coach, please?
I know. He's so dang smart.
That's amazing. That's incredible. Okay, Annie, what's next for you?
Well, we are working on a book called Living Naked, which is really about the the life you don't want to escape from, the life that you don't need to self-medicate away from. I think of this naked mind as, we're on, I got myself out of the stream. I was kind of floundering and drowning around in the stream. And then now I'm standing at the side at the edge and I'm like pulling people out. Now I have these coaches alongside of me and we're pulling people out. We're all pulling people out of the stream. And I think living naked is about like going up the stream and saying, hey, why were we falling in to begin with? And what are we thinking about ourselves and about other people that's causing this much pain and causing this need to self-medicate? And so it's just awesome. It's like one of the coolest things that I've done. And then we are also publishing together a kids book. So this Naked Mind for kids, we've called it Buzz to Buzzkill. And so that is super exciting. It's been a passion project of mine for a long time, and just really distilling the 4 or 5 key ideas of what I wish I would have known before I took a drink into just little vignettes that are super accessible.
Incredible. Annie, you have to be one of the most naturally impressive or inspiring people. I mean, I keep saying impressive because I feel impressed, but you're not trying to impress me. You're not doing it to be impressive. So let me just say that you're an incredibly inspiring person, and I know that a lot of people are going to, feel lifted up by your words today, as well as by your work. Can you tell those who are listening and maybe not looking at show notes, give us your URLs or your social handles? Where can we follow you and find out more and be part of your program, be part of your world?
Awesome. So the podcast is probably the best place. So this Naked Mind podcast. And then if you want to try the alcohol experiment, it's at alcoholexperiment.com. Or if you're curious about the app, it is in the App Store, This Naked Mind. And Maggie, I will just say, if anybody's listening to this, not from a business or publishing perspective, but kind of wondering about their own drinking, I think the message that is the most important for me to leave you with is that we've really just been doing the best we can with the tools we have. Like we've been giving this tool that's alcohol, and this tool is the tool for parenting. It's a tool for networking. It's a tool for business. It's a tool for happy hour. It's a tool for vacations. And we're just doing the best. And so if we can stop blaming ourselves for our behavior around alcohol, that for me is absolutely the first step toward any sort of positive questioning or change in the relationship, whatever that means for you. And it certainly doesn't have to mean stopping drinking or getting sober. It can be defined however you want to define it. And I just would encourage you to stop asking this super scary question of, do I have a problem or am I an alcoholic? And just ask the question of, would my life be better if I drank a bit less? And could I let myself off the hook, most importantly, and stop judging myself for my behavior? Because I lived there for far too long. And that's, I think, the real shame of it all, is that we live in that place of guilt and fear of even questioning it because of what it might mean about us. And I'm here to tell you, it doesn't mean anything about you, just how the substance is made.
Amazing. Annie Grace, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
I really hope this conversation has inspired you to give so much of your gift to the world that it expands you into your greatest possible version of yourself. Remember, it's not selfish just because we also benefit from it. And here's where I get to make a selfish request. New podcasts need all the help they can get. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate the show and subscribe to us on your favorite platform. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Selfish Gift Podcast. And send me a DM. I'd love to hear how you're sharing your gift with the world.